Hey folks, welcome back to the next episode of the Main Scoop. I'm thrilled to be back with you. I'm Greg Lotko, joined here by Dan Newman. How you been, Dan?
Greg, it's good to be back. It's always good to be side by side. It's been a minute, but it's good to see you. And all is going pretty well. Today's show is going to be great. I'm really excited. You know, observability has been one of those topics that's really risen to the top of many enterprises, many companies. And, you know, as we have so much data in our enterprise estates, there's a lot of complexity. You know, we hear a lot about AI. But in the end, right, if you're running enterprise IT, you really have to pay attention to all those streams of data, all those sources of data, and you have to really figure out how do you manage it, right?
It is about paying attention. I mean, when you think about it, you want to know what's going on, you want to be able to act, you want to be able to react, and how can you do that if you're not aware of what's going on? And that's what observability is all about.
Well, what do you think? You know, a lot of people out there like hearing from us, but I think we have a great guest today.
Let's bring in Brett.
Hey.
Hey, we've got Brett Dawson with us from Fidelity, and also from the farm.
Yeah.
I know we've gotten to talk before about this. So first of all, why don't you kind of introduce yourself? You know, tell folks a little bit about you and what it is that you do.
Sure. My name is Brett Dawson. I'm a principal mainframe operating systems programmer at Fidelity Investments, and I've been there for 10 years this year.
Wow, congratulations.
I, on the observability train, got the fortune of growing into my career during this big socialization of observability process that has been occurring for effectively the last 10 years.
So I want to hear about the farm. Can you?
Yeah. So I was going to tie those two together. So I kind of want to hear on a more basic, on a fundamental level, because observability is a concept that doesn't have to just apply to IT. And I know, you know, you think about observability throughout your life, and I know you've got a farm with a bunch of cattle running around. So what does observability mean to you?
Yeah. So observability to me means that I'm able to look around at the stuff that I'm managing, and I can actually take action on problems that are coming up before they become real problems. So on the cattle front, so my family runs a show cattle business, Silent Night Farms. So we're getting ready for the Fort Worth Stock Show coming up in January, and two of our main cattle that we'll be showing there this year have been showing a little bit lean. And so in this whole pursuit of observability, we've been noticing that, and we're working to correct that already by providing them with a higher fat diet so that they are less lean during the show and they look right there, right?
It's interesting. So you talk about observability, and we kind of opened this by saying you can kind of relate this across a bunch of things, right? So you talked about being able to realize that that cow isn't really where I want them to be as far as their sense of being or their fitness. So you kind of got to know the types of things you're looking for. Mm-hmm. You have to be able to see it, observe it, but then you got to know what it means in order to do something about it. So like, I tell you honestly, I could look across your field of cows and I would be able to observe, well, not observe, see. I would be able to see everything you could see, but I wouldn't know that I was observing, oh, that cow isn't quite fit, right? So there's intelligence as into understanding what you're looking for, and then there's the reaction, you know, the plan. What do you do about it, right? And that transcends IT.
Yeah, I mean, I could think of a lot of analogies where you sort of look at, you know, your environment, right, and being able to decide, you know, you're maybe looking at how you would rate property, you know, stuff like that. Someone that has an eye for it. Well, observability is doing a lot of it, is doing it very quickly. But, you know, you sort of have a thesis on the key business aspects of observability, you know, so let's take you off the farm for a moment.
Off the cattle business.
No, it's okay.
Yeah.
This is all good fun. Let's take you off the farm. Let's take you back, put you back in the server room for a minute and doing that job. You know, what are the sort of business aspects when you look at observability?
So what I notice a lot whenever I'm looking at a lot of the issues that go on within our shop, and even what you might read in newspapers for other organizations where it's clearly an observability miss of a problem, right? is that today there's a heavy reliance on a lot of the small team coordination of people that really understand data, but they're getting asked by too many people to provide reports and provide back information on the data that they understand, and not having a really good socialized way of providing those kinds of reports back to them so that they can get the answers that they need in a timely manner in order to help stop a lot of problems that could come up. Right?
So with that, when you talk about specialization or expertise, there's this pattern that they seem to be asked, what's the state of your niche? What's the state of your territory? And so observability is kind of taking a step back and, seeing the whole forest, right? You want to observe what's going on and have an understanding of the relationship across those things, right? So when you're asking those questions, it's not that somebody wants to know exactly necessarily what's going on here. They're asking about what's going on here to think about how it relates to something else or how that aspect might impact something else.
Right. Yeah, and a lot of the stuff that that we encounter is trying to marry data between different platforms, different services, different applications, different programs in the same application. Right? In order to drive a lot of contextual information of all of this data that we get today and try and make something sensible out of that data so that we can take action on things that show up that are strange.
Well, you're looking at the performance of applications. You're looking at root cause. If something's been down, what does that mean? You're looking at the ROI that you're getting out of certain tools and applications that you're invested in. I mean, these are all the sort of typical areas. And of course, there's all kinds of anomalies, and then observability flows into security, which is another, you do see a lot of ties together to, everything from, how is the app running? And then of course, is there vulnerabilities, and how are we addressing those vulnerabilities? I mean, you've been at this, you said a decade, but you've probably seen, look, the sprawl, and, you have data all over the place now. You've got your data at the edge, you got your data on device, but then of course you have your data centers, your cloud. We've seen multi-cloud proliferate. We're seeing that go even faster with all that's going on with AI. We're trying to ingest more. And then of course we're trying to build custom models, small language. We're trying to train and tune. We're trying to run RAG. All these things create new, observability challenges. So kind of talk about the evolution over a decade of what you're sort of seeing and how observability you ended up kind of in this role doing this, and how much has it changed?
Well, so I will say the biggest thing was whenever this observability socialization really started taking off was that all of a sudden there was 9 or 10 different observability solutions, and all of a sudden all your different business units said, oh, but I want to use this one and not this one, and there was no real standardization of being able to pull that data together and really be able to look at it. And it's only been in the last 18, 24 months, right, where you heard this small term of OTel, right, open telemetry, where all of a sudden now it's becoming it's basically becoming a de facto standard of how you're going to feed data so that everybody knows how to look at the data the same way, so that there's no confusion between two data points that's coming in, because it's all known through an open format. And I think that's been a really big trend over the last 10 years.
Speaking the same kind of language or context so that you can compare across the hybrid environments, right?
Yeah, because that's been a big thing, and it's easy to go look at all that kind of stuff where you move from Splunk to Elk became a thing, to then moving to now OpenSearch, and you're just adding more tools of how do I look at my data versus how am I ingesting that data in a known format.
And then making sense of it. I mean, you earlier on you were talking about all this data that's coming at you, and it made me think of the fire hose. So you got the fire hose coming at you. You want to be able to categorize it and standardize it so that you know that you're looking at things and being able to compare them the same way. but then you got to kind of pick through the needles in the haystack and figure out what's important to you and then how those elements relate.
Yeah, exactly.
It's interesting too to hear about the examples of the different tools and the different business units. You know, it kind of reminds me of like, are we using Zoom? Are we using WebEx? Are we using Teams? Except for IT nerds, you know, that are trying to figure out what they're going to use for these solutions. But like, how much more work is it? How much more focus is on it? How much more time is spent? Now, again, I'm not asking you to share anything proprietary because I know you can't, but like, Fidelity is a really big fund. I mean, a number of, it's a very big business. The data has to be, mountainous, the amount of data. Like, is the effort, the work, is it becoming more complicated, or is that the observability tools, are they actually making this easier to handle? And are you able to get them all into one? Like, are you able to do it all with one solution, or are you still running multiples?
Yeah, so is it just expanding or is it narrowing and you're getting more focus?
I think that we're in that, or that over that, the hill of that beginner stage of a lot of the trends that come along, where now we're starting to see a lot of focus into, okay, now we've experienced every product, because every product under the sun came out within a 2-year period, and there was no real governance around a lot of things, to where now we know where the strengths and weaknesses are of the different platforms that we're seeing, to where now we can start driving, and you see it all over the place. People find their favorites now after 10 years, and they start to just pick them, and they're the ones that serve them best, right?
And you also see, fundamentally I could say what works and what doesn't work, but that's a little too over the top. It's what provides value and what's meaningful and what's actionable versus, I can see that you can tell me that, and I can see that I have that information, but it doesn't really provoke me to do anything, right? So you kind of figure out, there's all this stuff that I can observe, but what are the things that are most important, right? And I would imagine as you get the experience within your business of seeing where that leads you, you go, okay, this tool may be more well suited to what it is we're looking for versus something else, even though everything across the board is kind of claiming to the goal of getting to the same end game. Yeah.
So resiliency has been a really important topic as well. We all know there's sort of this motion of proactivity, and this motion of, like, a lot of what observability is about is actually being able to identify an issue ahead of the problem before it takes down applications.
Identify that you're trending to a state that would cause an outage or an issue.
Correct.
So let's address it before we get there.
Right. And so we've all seen resiliency issues. I mean, sometimes they seem more controllable than others. Brett, do you see this sort of tie together? Does observability and resiliency, are they kind of looked at in the same conversation, or are they treated sort of differently?
Are they the milk and the beef?
I tend to look at them in the same light, right? Because from the Venn diagram of things, there's a lot of things about resiliency concepts that lend themselves well to observability concepts, right? The faster I can observe that a problem is about to occur, the faster I can shore up and make my platform more resilient to that issue actually occurring, right? So there's a lot of overlap there, but from a resiliency perspective, it's still playing with the unknown, right? How am I supposed to actually prevent any and all problems from occurring, right? Which is the effective end game of resiliency.
Right, you're trying to avoid a problem that might not have occurred, or an environment or a situation that might not have occurred.
Right.
There's this cold front coming in, this warm front, a dust cloud, and that situation may never have presented itself before, right? A drought with, something else going on, fox or coyotes in your cattle field, right? Yeah.
We're going to keep going back to that.
Yeah, it's fun.
All right, cool. Seriously, though, you say there may not be, but to me, a path of value, right, is how AI can do this at scale, right? You can't monitor and look at every single problem and have hands-on resolutions for every single problem. Anomaly detection, root cause analysis, early detection, all seem very AI-centric problems, things that machine learning, algorithms. How are you thinking about that? How much is that sort of optimizing? How much are you investing in that?
That is a big trend that we've been playing around with and noticing, is that machine learning specifically has been something that should and can bring value to an organization, as long as you're using it for the correct data points, right? Not all data is important enough to indicate that a problem is going to occur, right? That doesn't mean that I'm not interested in the data. Contextually, it could be very insightful if we see an anomaly occurring, because it could help us determine why the anomaly is occurring, but that's not necessarily going to tell us that an anomaly is occurring, right? So yeah, I think it's definitely right there in lockstep with observability, especially as you see a lot larger scale of data that's coming in, right? Think of solutions around, from a like a supermarket type of perspective, right? Where you could be getting data back from, your point of sale machines all the way to your back end systems, and all of the data that traverses all of that. There are not enough humans with enough knowledge in the world that can kind of take that kind of data and roll with it. But you throw that through some really good machine learning and anomaly detection engines, and all of a sudden you're able to see that, yeah, the 5% of failed transactions that occurred in this region of the Northeast was because we saw a weird internet outage and whatever, right? To where having that kind of observability at that scale lends itself to a required assistance of
Yeah, we're in a world where we're instrumenting everything, right? So you can effectively monitor everything. You could know everything that's going on everywhere with everything. But then saying, hey, let's apply AI to determine what are the most important things that I know and how do they relate. And then if you use AI and machine learning to say, here are the patterns or the things that are leading to something that would be bad or that I don't want to have happen, or even opportunistically identify a pattern of something that I want to take advantage of, you can certainly do that with applying technology. And more, it's then a learning of having AI then recommend, okay, now what do I want to do about it? Not only do I see where it's trending and that this could be good, bad, or indifferent, but what's the action that I want to take?
I certainly
could kick it off.
I certainly like MBA. I certainly like the idea of next best actions. I certainly like the idea of automations. These are pragmatic AI use cases. We love all the generative stuff, but AGI and all that stuff. But there's things where you build algorithms, you get recommendations, you get actions, you get automations. These are things that bring a lot of value to platforms, a lot of value to keeping IT systems running.
All right, so when we think about the world today, we think about all the observability tools we have, and I just think back, 5-10 years ago, it used to be you'd have senior executives or operations people checking in saying, hey, is everything running okay? Are we all right? Are we set for the weekend? Are we set for this big holiday? With the tools and the capabilities out there, is there a higher expectation or a new expectation on how often people can check in and when they can get data and know things are okay, or hey, where are they trending?
Oh, definitely, right? Especially coming into the mainframe space, where traditionally it was, hey, how were we a week ago? To a few years ago, a decade ago, how were we yesterday? Well, that's great. I need to know how we were an hour ago, or what about right now, right? And that's kind of that's the trend.
Right?
And
so it's not
exactly.
just
I want to know what
are we
we're
okay,
like right
but how
now.
okay are we?
Exactly. I want to know how we are right now, and how does that compare to how we were an hour ago, or yesterday, or a week ago, right? Help me understand where I'm trending to, and so that I can understand where we might be going. Right?
Yeah. So I mean, it used to be that you would think, wow, we were processing this many transactions and it's okay because we have enough capacity. Now it's kind of, oh, wow, we're processing this many transactions and it's 30% more than we were doing an hour ago or last week, but with dynamic capacity being turned on, we still have 20% headroom or 30% headroom. And don't worry, we have enough hardware on the floor that we can grow that much more, right? So it's the fan out of the questions in
Or-
time and dimensions.
Yeah. Or even in the reverse, right? We're all of a sudden seeing a 20% reduction in transactions. Why do we have so much headroom?
Right.
Why can't we draw that back so we can save some money, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That sort of thing. So yeah, I think there definitely has been a huge trend into I need as close to real time as I possibly can get. And, traditionally on the mainframe, that just wasn't really a thing, right? You really relied on Jeff in the back room who could analyze and honestly read SMF binary and tell you that data, right?
Yeah, so dynamically, and I know I keep bringing it back to the cattle, right? But it's like you've got that spigot open and you're filling up the trough with water, but it's overflowing. Why keep that spigot open? You're going to be paying for the water. So in a world today where you have dynamic hardware, you have dynamic software, hey, if my transaction rate is going down and I don't need the capacity sitting there idle, I might as well turn down the machine and that'll lower my software bill, or at least leave me headroom that I can roll over when I do hit that spike.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense.
And Brett, I want to thank you so much for joining us. I think it was really interesting to hear, such a large organization, institution, so much data.
And I learned about Captain.
But in serious, it was a really fun conversation. We know
Absolutely.
observability is a big trend line, and this is something that every organization is really up against. And of course, we've had this conversation here on the Main Scoop, I don't know how many times, but the hybrid, path that everyone is on, the amount of data, it's only going to grow exponentially. Companies trying to find a way to cull that data and utilize it, and of course, make sure that systems are running, that applications are running, that their analytics are running. It's complicated, and so Brett it's a big job for him.
And so, hybrid, I think, should be expansive. As we went through this conversation and we talk about the totality of a lot of the things we've been talking about, we've used hybrid to talk about platforms and technology and environments that way. But it's really hybrid beyond that, using the best tool for the right problem, the best platform, and the right person.
It's the genesis of the show, is that hybrid isn't just hybrid cloud. It's so much more.
Absolutely.
And that's why, by the way, the mainframe remains an institution within the institutions. And
it's part of that mix, an important part.
And as an analyst that focuses a lot on the future, I genuinely believe what you do and what the mainframe does has a long and healthy future, helping companies achieve most with AI and every other technology disruption that's coming. For this episode, though, Greg, we got to stop talking.
All right.
Got to stop. No more cows.
Thanks again, Brett. Appreciate
No more observability.
Yep.
No more nothing. And everybody hit that subscribe button. Join us here on the Main Scoop for all of our episodes. We are almost 30 episodes in now.
Yeah.
We've been doing this for a while, and I look forward to doing this some more. We appreciate the community. We appreciate you being part of the show. We'll see you all soon. Bye-bye now.
See you next time.